In Chapter 5, your textbook and the supplemental videos with your textbook go over how to find normal probabilities and inverse probabilities using the TI-83 calculator. I think this process is much easier and straightforward in Excel, and I'm going to show you how to do that in Excel. So what I have up here is, let's say I have a normal distribution with a mean of 15 and a standard deviation of 3. We're going to first be asked to find the probability that some value is less than 11. Now first we have to calculate the z-score in order to calculate the normal probabilities. Excel can do that if we hit equals, open a parentheses, because we need to make sure the numerator happens first, and we know we take the value minus the mean divided by the standard deviation. Here the value is 11, minus the mean of 15, close the parentheses, divide by the standard deviation of 3. And I get a z-value of negative 1.333. To find that probability in Excel, we hit equals norm.s.dist and open a parentheses. That stands for normal standard distribution. And then it's going to want us to give it the z-value. I'll just click the z-value. And then with the normal, we will always do comma true. And what that does is gives us all the probability up to that point. In other words, everything smaller than 11. And when I hit enter, I find the probability is about 9%. Now the second one says, what about probability greater than 10? Well, first we need to find the z-value. Same way, equals, open a parentheses, 10 minus the mean of 15, close the parentheses, divided by the standard deviation of 3. Now my z-value is negative 1.66. However, I want to be greater than that value, and Excel tells me what's less than that value. Less than that value is the complement or opposite of greater than. So we're going to hit equals, and we will do 1 minus the normal probability, because that'll give us the greater than value. Same thing, norm.s.dist, open a parentheses, click the z-value, and it's always true, comma true, close the parentheses. And the probability a random value is greater than 10, you see, is about 95%. Now, what if we wanted the probability between 13 and 14? Well, there's actually two z-values here, a z-value for 13 and a z-value for 14. So we'll do them both. Equals, open a parentheses, 13 minus the mean of 15, close the parentheses, divided by the standard deviation of 3. And equals, open a parentheses, 14 minus the mean of 15 divided by the standard deviation of 3. And so we've got these two z-values. Now we'll come over and find the actual probability. There's a couple ways we can do this. We can find the individual probabilities by hitting equals norm.s.dist, the z-value and true. And we find that the 13 has 25% to the left of it. For the 14 equals norm.s.dist, open a parentheses, click the z-value, and type in true. And we've got 36%, or almost 37%, to the left of the 14. Now we need to subtract these probabilities to find out what's in between them. So we'll select the bigger one, equals the bigger one, minus, select the smaller one, and we find a probability of 11, almost 12%. Now, if you're feeling comfortable with Excel, another way you could have done this is we could have done it all in one line. Here's what that looks like. First, we'll do the big value, equals norm.s.dis. We We take the z-value that went with the larger number, comma, true, and then we subtract the other value, norm.s.dist, click the z-value, and say true. This will take the probability of the 14 minus the probability of the 13, and you see we get the same probability of 11.7%. Now there's another way we could have also done these probabilities without having to find the z-values, and that is to just use the straight normal distribution function. It's a little more to type, but let's take a look at how that works. So I'm going to make a new column with just the norm, regular normal. This is not the standard normal. We're going to use a mean of 15 and a standard deviation of 3. So to be less than 11, we'll hit equals norm dot, and instead of s for standard, we're just going to do dist. There's going to be more things for us to type in. First, the x value. We're looking at less than 11, comma, the mean, which we know is 15, comma, the standard deviation, which is 3, comma, and then we always type in true at the end. And you see we get the exact same probability. Similar, when we want to be greater than 10, the Excel is going to give us the less than value. So to get the greater than value, we have to do 1 minus, same as before, but now we'll do norm.dist. The value is 10, the mean is 15, the standard deviation is 3, and we always type true. Same exact probability. To be between 13 and 14, we can subtract the values, equals norm.dist. Always start with the bigger one, which is the 14, comma, the mean is 15, comma, the standard deviation is 3, and we always type true, minus norm.dist. The x value of the smaller one is 13, comma, mean is 15, comma, the standard deviation is 3, comma, true, and we'll get the exact same probability. Now in the very last section, or the next section, you're going to work backwards, where we know what the probability is, and we want to find out what x values are going to give us those probabilities. So for example, if I want to know what value has 20% of the data below it, in other words, what z-value will give me an answer of 0.2. This is going backwards, where we want the actual z-value. We call that the inverse. So to get the inverse, we'll type in equals norm dot s, because we're doing z-value standards, dot inv, that stands for inverse, and then we just type in the probability. We want 20% or 0.2 below, and that gives us a z-value of negative 0.84. Now in the textbook and the videos, you saw that to change a z-value to an x value, we take the z-value, hit equals, select the z-value, times the standard deviation, which is 3, plus the mean, 15. And that tells us that 20% of the values will fall below about 12.5. What if I want to be above that value? Well, it's very similar. We'll say equals norm dot s dot inverse, because we're doing z-values in the standard normal. But this time, for the probability, we want 45% above. Because we want the other side, we're going to do 1 minus the 0.45 to get the 45% above. And you'll see that's equal to a z-value of 0.12. Again, to get the x value, we'll say equals the z-value times the standard deviation of 3 plus the mean of 15. 45% of the data will be above 15.37. What if I want the middle 90%? Now this is tricky because I have to think in the middle. Let me do a little graphic here. We've got the middle, and then we've got the left tail, and we've got the right tail. We'll color that red. So in the middle, there's going to be 90%. That means there's going to be a little bit on the left and a little bit on the right. And because it's symmetrical, we know the remaining 10% has to be split 5% on one side and 5% on the other side. So what I'm actually interested in is a z-value where we have less than that is 5%. So we'll do equals norm dot s for standard inverse, and the probability we want is 0.05%. But that just gives us the lower value. The higher value on the right is going to have 95% below it because it has to capture both parts. So we'll equals norm dot s dot inverse. The probability now is 0.95, and we find it's the opposite, 0.164, is the other z-value. There's two z-values when we want to be between a number, between negative 1.6 and positive 1.6. We can change these to x values really quick by hitting equals the z-value times the standard deviation plus the mean. In fact, for all of these, we could have probably just taken that corner and dragged it down because we selected the z-value cell. So we see 90% of the data is going to be between about 10 and 20. Again, we could have done this with just normal inverse function and gotten to the answer with one calculation, but we have to type in more. To do just with the normal, with a mean of 15 and a standard deviation of 3, without doing the z step, we type in equals norm dot inverse, I and v. The probability we want to be less than 20%, or to have 20% of the data below, is 0.2, comma. We tell it the mean is 15, and the standard deviation is 3, and we find the exact same x value. For the 45% above, very similar, we'll type in equals norm dot inverse, I and v. The probability, remember, if we type in 0.45, that'll give us the left half. We don't want the left half, we want the right half. We want to be above that value, so we have to do 1 minus 0.45, comma. The mean is 15, and the standard deviation is 3. 15.37 again. For the middle 90%, very similar. We want 5% on the value for 5% to the left and the value for 95% to the left. So we'll say equals norm dot inverse, I and v. Probability of 0.05, mean of 15, standard deviation is 3. There's our 10. To get the larger value, equals norm dot I and v. Probability this time is 0.95, mean is 15, and the standard deviation is 3. And we get the exact same values. So hopefully that will help you use Excel to supplement your homework assignments for Chapter 5. Let me know if you have any questions. Have a wonderful day.